Welcome to the Babies in Business Podcast. Join your hosts, Rachel and Avram Gonzales, real-life parents and business partners. Each week on Babies in Business, Rachel and Avram create a space for entrepreneurial parents to find their own way. They'll dive into insights on topics like leadership, efficiency, self-awareness, budgeting, and human psychology as they nurture their family and build their business. Here's your hosts, Avram and Rachel.
Welcome back to the Babies in Business Podcast. Avram Gonzales here with Rachel Gonzales.
Hello.
Man, we're really excited to record this episode for you today because there's one thing that we love talking about. It's strategy.
Yes.
Rachel's come along for this ride in a big way. When we first got together, it was like all board games, all strategy, all the time. You were a little overwhelmed.
Oh my gosh. To say that you're intense is saying it lightly when it comes to board games. So I was definitely intimidated, but also I think some of it was, there was a lot of energy around board games, so strategy in general, but then also just a lot of what I grew up with. So a lot of baggage played into how I reacted to all this.
That's true. Eventually she came around. She likes playing a game now. And more importantly, when it comes to business, we both have a mind for putting the right pieces together in the right order at the right time. And we love the puzzle that is trying to get something to be as efficient as possible or as fast as possible or whatever the outcome is that we're looking for. We enjoy figuring out that path. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs have that in common. Today's episode is all about knowing when is the right time to change your strategy. Because if you're like most entrepreneurs, you have great ideas, you have a lot of ideas, and the urge to just charge forward and execute on them is very high. And at the end of the day, we only have so much time and resources to execute on our goals that if we don't pick the right strategy, we will be wasting a lot of time and effort.
Well, and I think that when it comes to you and me and our partnership, I think that, and partnership being marriage and business and all those things, that we really can help to bring some balance to each other. Maybe balance isn't the right word, but my strengths, your strengths, we can come together and talk about some ideas and all these different things. And then we can help each other just have different and better and new perspectives sometimes that are really, really helpful in these kinds of situations.
We often think of strategy in terms of business, but this totally applies to household. We'll have a great example for you here towards the end of the podcast today. What we want to do is we want to give you a real life example live in how we are looking to change up one of the strategies that we're executing on. We're going to look at how that matches up or doesn't match up with our goals. We're also going to evaluate what we're currently doing to see if, is that enough? Or are we just missing one small piece? Or do we have to scrap it and throw the whole thing away? That is what we are examining and getting into today, is really showing you and demonstrating for you real time some of the important questions you have to ask yourself to figure out, am I on the right path? Do I just need to tweak things a little bit? Or do I need to start over from scratch?
Sure.
And knowing that it's the right time is super important because you don't want to cut your strategy short when you're on the winning path, but you just haven't realized the result yet.
Right. And I think that goes back to something that I heard about, I was learning how to market my business. I was a seamstress at the time. And the person that was teaching was saying, you don't want to change something about your business if it's just from one customer's feedback. And because so many of the things that you're doing are working, and even probably the thing that they're complaining about is working, it just wasn't working for them. And that doesn't mean that it's not working as a whole in your business, but just having, so today we're really going to talk about having that clarity about where you want to go, where you are, and how to get there. And then more to come,
So the inspiration for this episode is the podcast itself babies in business? Okay. So in diving into this today, we want to be transparent and open and share some of our goals when we started the podcast. And the purpose today is we wanted to grow the podcast. We started the podcast for fun because we saw so much the overlap between, raising a family and building a business.
Yeah.
And then it became, well, this is a great way to build our personal brands and share a part of ourselves with people and make a difference, make an impact. And then it's like, well, I mean, we sure like to grow and reach more people.
Sure.
And that's where we've arrived today is we have published 26. I believe this is the 27th episode. And we're happy with what we've done so far. But we definitely feel like there's a lot better and maybe other ways of reaching more people. Think that's a good summary?
I think so. I just love how what has all over the 26 episodes that we've published, that it went from this being the goal to a total different thing being the goal, but it took running it a couple of times to see. I mean, 26 is not just a couple, but running it for some time so that we could, one, have the experience, two, see the receptiveness of people about the topics, things like that. You got to try something to see if it's working, but also if it's still feeding your soul. I think that's part of the questions that we're asking too.
It really is. So the reason that we're doing the podcast is there's something more to be desired.
Yeah.
So the first step, I think, in understanding and figuring out if it's time to change your strategy is reviewing your goals. I know that you've got some thoughts about this. We had some conversations about goals lately and the podcast. So maybe we even brought this up in recent episodes.
For sure.
How do you know it's the right goal?
Well, I think you have to ask some questions like, is this my goal? If things aren't working, are these the right goals? I think you're looking at a couple of different things, like, is it your goal? Because if it's not getting done, maybe it's just not your goal. You're not passionate about it. Something
What do
like
you
that.
mean it's not your
But-
goal?
Well, maybe it was given to you. It's a belief that you don't actually align with, that you've been given. So, and I'm not specifically talking about the podcast in that example.
Right.
But in goals, when we create these goals, any goal, I think we really just have to ask ourselves, is this our goal? But then also, is this a goal that I actually want?
Is it truly important to me?
Yeah. So if it's not getting done, like when you're in the evaluation stage, thinking, is this the right goal? You're really asking, is this working? Is this what I want? Is this getting me where I want to go? Is where I thought I want to go where I want to go?
Right. 26
You know?
episodes in, is it still feeding the soul?
Right.
These are all
Exactly.
important questions.
Yeah. So, asking those questions and then those answers, the answer to that question leads you to other things. And it's following kind of the rabbit hole of, is this your goal? Is it not? Do we need to change it? And then you make some adjustments. So that, I think that's super important when we can really just get some clarity around goals.
Yeah.
And whether we're reaching them or not, and why that might be.
In this particular case, we didn't have a specific goal with, we want this many subscribers or this many downloads. But I know that in other parts of business and life, sometimes we have numbers attached to it.
Yeah.
So in this case, it doesn't really match up with how I would approach it in a regular business sense of, well, how far away are we from where we thought we would be? Did we
Sure.
have a goal to hit this much revenue or this many team members or, and then what's the gap?
Sure.
I think it's important to understand the gap because it helps you get real with where you actually landed versus where you wanted to go and making you ask some of those deeper questions in between.
Yeah. And I think too, like the gap and the goal and all those things, I think that it's also really important to look at, when we start the podcast, thinking about this conversation that we're having and why we're readjusting and changing this goal possibly, that I think we just started out thinking, would this be interesting? Would this be for us to talk about? And all these different things that come up. And then we start looking at the data and seeing that people are downloading or they're they're not interacting on social media, but we're putting a lot of time there.
Sure.
Different things. And so we just have to ask ourselves, do we have a goal now? Can we have a goal now? I think because we're seeing some data and different things, and now we have kind of guideposts we can look at.
So next, I think, after considering all of this, is evaluating the actual strategy. I think that's where you were going with it. And I think there are 3 different categories to evaluating what you're currently doing and measuring it against the gap that we were talking about. First are the actual activities that you're doing. So the question is, am I doing the right things? That's the first question we have to ask ourselves. The second one is, how effective are we being at those particular activities? And the third one is, have we given it enough time or done it enough times to find out if it's actually effective?
Building a business while raising a family can be tough to juggle for any entrepreneur. Knowing where to focus and how to spend your limited time is critical to your success. That's why Babies in Business has produced and made available a fantastic audio resource for you. It's titled 5 Key Focus Areas to Build a Profitable Business Without Burnout. During this short training, Rachel and Avram peel back the curtain on their secrets to building a business that serves your family, your dreams, and beyond. To download your free copy of the 5 Key Focus Areas, go to babiesandbiz.com/download. Again, that's babiesandbiz.com/download to get your free copy. We hope you enjoy. Now, back to the podcast.
So in looping back and going through these 3 items, activities, I think of, one of my journey going to the gym. I think this might end up getting referenced a few times here. If my goal was to run a half marathon, but all I was doing was lifting weights, I'm not doing the right activities.
Right.
So we have to ask ourselves with the podcast, and you, the listener, whatever you're applying this to, are the activities that I'm doing congruent with the outcome and the goal?
Yeah, correct.
What are the experts saying? Have you done the research? Have you talked to people? Did you just blindly jump into this on a whim?
Right.
I've been there many times. But somewhere we need to find out and discover if we're doing the right activities. The wrong activities will never get you to where you want to go.
Well, and I think we need to be in touch with reality too, because like you're saying, maybe it's the wrong method. You're
Yes.
getting your muscles strong, but you're not doing anything about stamina and running, all these different things. So, the activities are super important because that is what is going to get you what you need.
For us with the podcast, the promotional strategy was sharing it through our personal contacts and connections, and then spending a lot of time and energy on creating social media posts.
Yeah.
Right? Because a lot of people have said this is the way to grow the business. And we're going to talk about in more detail one of the following podcasts. We're going to look a little bit more closely at some of these activities. But we realized that the effectiveness, our second point here, the effectiveness of the social posts that we've been putting together, just not really that great, not reaching people. We're assuming that the content is good or good enough to gather listenership.
Sure.
Right.
Sure. And that's what, we were seeing like the downloads, and then we were, as far as like on the podcast platform, and then we were looking at the social media stuff. And really the reason why we actually looked at that, we, like you said, we put a lot of time into that. So is it reaping some kind of reward? And if it's not, then what is the harm in changing that method? Like we talked about the activities, could we change an activity or something that's contributing to this?
Correct.
So that we could get more effectiveness. That's the whole point of what we're trying to say.
And the goal being that we want to grow. We're not seeing the data correlate on the back end. Again, we're going to talk some more about the data in a future episode, but we're setting the stage here today. It just didn't seem like we're correlating growth and things on social media to growth of the podcast. It almost seems like they're rowing in 2 different directions.
Yeah, correct. Well, and there's so much time that goes into that. So we just have to ask, are there more effective things to be spending our time on?
Exactly.
And we have to find that answer. If it is yes, then we do something else.
If not, then it's what? Or
Exactly.
right.
Yeah. But we need to ask, sometimes they're hard questions because maybe you might be attached to whatever the activities are and you're not getting the effectiveness, but you just love the activity so much, the effectiveness doesn't really actually matter.
Sure.
So then maybe that goal changes altogether.
It could.
It could be different ends of the spectrum
Yeah.
at a certain point, I think.
Well, this leads right
But-
into, have we given the current strategy enough time? And I would say after 26 episodes, and I think it's over 200 something social posts now, that we don't feel like the effort that went into that is congruent with the level of growth of the podcast experience. So right now we're doing like 50 to 75 downloads an episode, which is awesome. And for the effort we've put in between us and the rest of our team to produce and publish the stuff, just doesn't seem like it's matching up, being congruent. And so it's like, well, have I given it enough time?
Right.
You wouldn't go to the gym like for a week and expect huge gains.
Sure.
The same thing is going to be true here. Did you try it one time? Have you done it enough times to really know?
Yeah.
That's where you got to be real.
Well, and I think, having gone through 26 episodes, I think it's really cool what we've seen. Even in those 26 episodes, some things have changed about our process, about how we do things. All sorts of things have come about from it. But we have discovered that we do know more about the process. We know more about what goes into it, what we're seeing, what it takes, the true time, cost, and commitment that it takes. And that allows us to that, because we've tested it, we know that it works as far as the process goes. That gives us the opportunity to make changes because we have let it go for long enough to, well, is this working or is this not? We can actually say, yes, it is, or no, it's not.
Well, at this point, we also know that there is a lot working, and really what we're talking about is maybe changing 10% of what we do, 15% of what we do, versus scrapping the whole thing
Right.
and starting over with a totally different strategy.
Exactly.
We're going to blend it with some new stuff. In wrapping things up here, I know that we were talking about before we recorded this episode how our personal budgeting journey has changed. I think it's a good metaphor for what we're talking about here. Some of the tools and methods that we've done have changed. Could you briefly touch on that?
Yeah, I love the journey that we've had on our financials, on our personal side, on our finances. We started just with questions, how can this be better? But then we started using Dave Ramsey's tools, and that's like the Every Dollar app and how he attacks credit cards or debt or things like that, how you do that. So we started with Dave Ramsey, and then so I love the idea of an envelope system for a budget. And what that is, for people that don't understand or know that, or it just doesn't make sense, it's where you literally, so it's like your grandma, she might have had an envelope for rent, and she put cash money into that envelope, and she set that aside physically so that she always had she had money for rent. So what we do now is a digital envelope system where each section of your life, you might have a different thing. Like we have a fund for Zuna so that she has money for food and for different things that she needs, but we put away a certain amount each month. And I had to go from different software to different software. I was using spreadsheets, which
Well,
was a
we
shit show.
started literally with the actual physical envelopes. Then we moved to the digital envelopes.
It's
Then we
true.
moved to this software. Then
It's
we moved to
true.
this software. Then we moved to this software.
Yeah.
So why do we move from one software to the other?
Yeah, so what we were doing was like the spreadsheets weren't working because there was so much physical time involved making sure that they were accurate. There was no checking system. It was really hard to balance. So then we went to an app, and that app, it was okay. Then we went to another app, and it wasn't great. And then we finally found Good Budget, which is awesome because it allows you to create your own envelopes and then add money to them each time. You can set it up so that it comes out every single time you get paid and yada, yada, yada. So the evolution of it, though, came about because we knew where we wanted to go with our budget, but we didn't know how to get there. So we just started. And starting, so like we've talked about repetition, starting gave us repetitions under our belt with whatever we started with. And that worked for a time. And then we moved on to something else. And we did that for a time, repetition. So on and on and on. It was probably over the span of, I want to say 6 to 8 months, maybe, that we went between the beginning to where we landed, where we really had it humming along.
So check this out. The strategy itself didn't really change. We had the methodology from Dave Ramsey, but what changed was the actual strategic plan, the way that we were going to achieve it. The methods themselves changed over time.
Correct.
And that's what we're trying to convey here in this episode is, are the goals the right goals? Are we headed in the right direction? Are we doing the right activities? Are we being effective at those activities? Have we done it long enough?
Yeah.
You take the answers to those questions and you realize really quickly, maybe I'm not so far off.
Well, and I think we also have to keep in mind, like with budget, of course we knew that the goal was correct. We wanted to get out of debt and we wanted to have more freedom with money. And we got there. So when you have a goal and I mean, we didn't even have to question that. That goal never came up in question. It was more like, how can we get this goal to be achieved? Because we wanted it so badly.
Yeah. So in the next episode, we're going to talk about how we have shifted our strategy. And we're going to start turning the goals that we've talked about today for growth into a strategic plan. So you can take this stuff, you can apply it to anything. We're going to use the podcast as a real life example. We'll be able to report back to you in 6 months after we see the results and share with you everything that we've learned. So we hope that you enjoy the journey. You come along with us. Have enjoyed the episode here today. You're going to have to find out next episode what we're changing up. So stay tuned for that. We're going to break it all down. And then you can take that framework, copy it into your business, copy it into your household, and just go nuts with it.
Yes.
All right. So that's it from us, Avram and Rachel here at the Babies in Business Podcast. Please find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all those places at Babies and Biz Pod. If you got questions, you can shoot them over to us. hello@babiesandbiz.com. That email does work. We do check it. So shoot us a message if you got ideas for an upcoming podcast episode. With that, we appreciate you for being here.
Bye for now.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Babies in Business Podcast. Who do you know that would benefit from hearing this episode? Share it with them and post about it on social media. You can find the show notes for this episode, free downloads, and connect with the rest of the community at babiesandbiz.com. We'll see you next time.